So Chevy's shipping the 2024 Trax out to dealerships. This is their move to capture the low end of the market for people who are screaming for more affordable vehicles out there, and they're bringing back the Trax name. And I think they've got a hit on their hands. Welcome back to All Cars, y'all. I am John, and the earlier Trax was pretty disappointing, as a matter of fact. The engine wasn't that great, the transmission wasn't that great, and it overall just felt cheap and looked dorky. And they took it off the market, I think partially due to low sales, but also they were totally revising it. I don't think they ever had the intention of bringing it back here, but people are screaming for more affordable options. And certainly with the average transaction price edging up over 45, probably on its way to 50,000 by the end of the year is what some people are saying. Coming in with something that's 21,500 is pretty darn impressive. Now, part of me wishes they brought back cheap cars, but the earlier cars they had, such as the Aveo, were pretty darn miserable. So this is going to hit the market just right. I think it's going to be a big success, and Chevy is actually predicting that this is going to be their third best seller of their entire lineup. So we get to take a look at it today and kind of talk about it and why I think it's going to be a hit for Chevy. Now, first off, let's talk about this is pretty small. It certainly lines up pretty closely with the Toyota Corolla Cross, the homely Honda HR-V, and the even more homely Hyundai Kona. And the Kona is admittedly a little bit smaller, a little bit narrower, but by price it fits in pretty nicely. The Trax looks fantastic. Now, the front of it, it looks a lot like a Blazer to me. It is that same general motif that Chevy's really been working with recently. In fact, this is a corporate cousin, a platform cousin of the Trailblazer. But the Trailblazer has more options and is a little bit more expensive. And honestly, I don't like it nearly as much. So let's talk about the outside first, and from basically every angle, I think this car looks fantastic. I think Chevy absolutely knocked this one out of the park. I don't love the Blazer overall. I thought it was a little overdone, a little in your face, but this really works for me. They've produced something that looks wide and low and just really, really well proportioned down the side and even the rear of it. I have to admit, I really, really like the looks of this car. And certainly when you think about the Kona and that HR-V, I think it looks a double, triple what those other two cars look like. But for everybody else, I think this is the best looking one in this subcompact SUV class. Now let's talk about what may be the weakness in this, and that is going to be the engine. Now, the Trax uses a 1.2-liter turbocharged 3-cylinder engine. Well, the competitors use basically a 2-liter 4-cylinder naturally aspirated. The Toyota has a hybrid option. The Hyundai actually has a inline version, a turbocharged faster version, and the Honda just uses the same one across the lineup. So for the Trax, you get just this one engine option. There is no all-wheel drive option. It is run through a 6-speed automatic transmission as your only option, and it's all on purpose. And I'm going to talk about that in my final thoughts here at the end. Now, the engine stacks up pretty darn well. It produces about 137 horsepower, which is a little low for this class when the Toyota produces 169 horsepower, the Honda produces 158, and the Hyundai produces 147. So this is a little down on power, but the Trax makes 162 foot-pounds of torque at only 2,500. That's more than its competitors at a much lower RPM, and I think that really illustrates what this car is meant for. This is meant more for city driving. This is meant for low-speed driving, so that torque is going to give you that punch to get around and change lanes and feel a little spunky around town. I'm not sure how this engine would do on the highway. And I know there's a lot of you, my viewers, who are like, oh, these little tiny engines, 3-cylinder, odd number of cylinders, hopped up beyond all belief with a turbocharger. How long are they really going to last? You know, one of the comparisons I have is the Escape has that little turbocharged 3-cylinder engine. And while it was a little rough at idle, it was super, super punchy to drive. And honestly, I don't have a problem with them. I have to believe in the metallurgy and in the engineering that it's going to be just fine. But I admit this whole combination, and certainly what I'm going to talk about on the interiors, this has become quickly one of the few Chevys that I'd kind of like to own it and see what it's really, really like. So it's slightly down in horsepower, really good torque numbers, and EPA numbers aren't too terribly bad. 28 on the city, 32 on the highway. That is slightly less than what you get from your competitors over here, 26 and 32. So very competitive there. Toyota is 31, 33, so it's slightly better in the city. And then the Hyundai, again, for front-wheel drive, is 30 and 35 on the highway. So again, the Trax doesn't quite measure up there. I think it'll provide a punchy driving experience, but it's not leading in terms of miles per gallon. When you get to the interior, things get a little bit better. Now, it certainly uses what I would call currently Chevy's motif of what they're trying to do. It's got that infotainment on top, 2 vents underneath, and then HVAC controls under that. The base levels here for the Trax come with analog gauges and an 8-inch cluster, but it can be upgraded. The higher trim lines have a digital gauge cluster and 11-inch infotainment. And it's slightly tilted towards the driver. And overall, you end up with something that is very, very contemporary and really looks good. I really like this interior design language that Chevy is doing. The materials are cheap. If you look at the pictures or you read any reviews, certainly Car and Driver did one, the materials are cheap. But it's okay this time. See, to me, there's a right way to do cheap materials and a wrong way to do cheap materials. Pretending that it's a fancier dash than it is, but making it cheap makes it look cheap. And I want to reference the Ford Maverick here. It uses cheap materials to keep the cost down. We all know it. But it uses cheap materials on the interior. But they're interesting materials. They're a mix of materials, and they are what I like to call fun and cheerfully cheap, right? This is the same thing for this Trax. These are not expensive plastics, but they're done in a way that they look honest about what they are. You're buying based on a price point, and here you go. I really like this. It comes with Apple CarPlay. It's got some higher quality materials at the high touch points. This is a really good interior that's just built to a price. And I honestly think, that generally Hyundai uses the same arrangement. I think the interior on the Trax looks much better because it's just more honest about what it is. So I think this is going to be a superstar because when you talk about pricing, this is a winner. Now, this starts at $21,495 for the base trim line LS. Now, they have a 1RS, an LT, a 2RS, and the new Active, which is the top of the line. It only starts at $24,995. This is a winner when you consider that the Honda the base one starts at $24,100. The Hyundai at $22,140, and then the Toyota at $23,600. So looking at these competitors that I'm focusing on, the Trax is $1,000, $2,000, or $3,000 less expensive for the base model. I think this is a winning proposition. I really do. I think they've got something that looks fantastic. I think that the engine will drive great on test drives. I think the interior is honestly cheap and cheerful and open and just kind of happy, all for a bargain price. And that's what impresses me the most. I've talked about on this channel before that I'm not a huge fan of GM, that I like what they do sometimes, but I don't trust them. I don't trust the quality. I don't trust the reliability. They've done me wrong for most of my life, but increasingly I'm coming around to them. I know they still have their quality control issues, but consistently I see them doing better and better and better. And certainly cars like the Bolt and then the new Equinox EV I'm super excited about, add this in there, and dang, I'm kind of liking what I'm seeing here. And certainly for a price. And what I respect about this car the most is that they built it to a price intentionally. There's a lot of cars over the past 40 some odd years from GM that they were built cheaply, but they weren't priced cheaply, if you know what I mean. They were nickeled and dimed to death until they didn't really feel like they competed. This one, it is built in South Korea. It's built by, I believe, their Daewoo division, GM South Korea. It is designed by them, and they've made massive, massive advancements in their cars over the decades, and even the Aveo and the cars around. You could see the advancement. So I kind of think this is going to be pretty solid, pretty good. I'm awfully darn impressed with it. But it feels like they made intentional choices to get this to a price leader point, not they nickeled and dimed their way into something that feels insubstantial. That engine choice, going with a 6-speed, not an 8-speed transmission, for example, not offering all-wheel drive, and then purposefully designing a interior that's going to be that cheap, cheerful. I really like what I'm seeing here. I think GM made a lot of smart decisions here. I really want to go drive one and see what it feels like, certainly at higher speeds on the interstate. But right now, I think this is going to be, if not a home run, I think it's going to be a solid triple for GM. Let me know what you think below, guys. Thanks for being here.